Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's lesson on reading a soft left affirmative. This is something Grace and I love to do in our time in policy debate, and I hope it's something that you'll look into doing because they're pretty popular in the Eastern Missouri district. So, first, let's try to understand what it means to be a soft left affirmative. So, first, it means your actor is going to be the United States federal government. This is contrasted to some of the more circuity left wing arguments that are sort of critical affirmatives. So that's the soft in soft left. You're still acting through the United States government. Next, your link chains. They're going to be short and generally plausible. So that means that rather than, the difference between soft left and big stick maybe is that big stick is probably going to have long link chains where they read multiple links trying to get their plan out to a big impact like nuclear war. Whereas a soft left affirmative, still going through the United States government, is going to try to have short and plausible link chains, maybe one or two links maximum, to get to perhaps a smaller impact, admittedly. And then the final part of this is linear impacts rather than brink impacts. If you're not familiar with those terms, a linear impact is something like poverty. You can reduce poverty without getting rid of poverty. Or you can look at something like police violence, right? You can reduce the number of police killings without totally getting rid of them. Whereas a brink impact is something like going to war with China, right? We're either going to go to war or we're not. And the reason that that matters is a solvency attack against a brink impact can basically take it out completely, right? If it seems unlikely that we're going to go to war with China, you make some good arguments about that. You can beat a brink impact almost completely. But with a linear impact, right, you can make some arguments about why we're not going to get rid of all the poverty, but it's harder to get to that 0% solvency threshold when you have a linear impact. And these all sort of work together to make soft left affirmatives the sort of like unobjectionable type of AF. So it has an actor of the United States federal government, generally topical. The link chains, there's not too much to make fun of. They're short, they're plausible. And even if you do have good arguments against it, they're still going to solve somewhat because of those linear impacts. Here's a description of that. Yeah, poverty, racism, mass incarceration, great examples of linear ones, whereas war, economic collapse are going to be brink impacts. Some interesting ones like economic growth, I think I would argue is a linear impact, though it often gets treated as a brink impact. And similarly, climate change, often treated as a brink impact, even though I think it should be a linear impact. So let's talk about an example soft left affirmative. This is one that Grace and I read our senior year. It was about abolishing federal mandatory minimums. So you see, we've got the actor, the United States federal government. We're abolishing federal mandatory minimums. And the advantages, let's say a mass incarceration advantage would be something like uniqueness, mandatory minimums increase mass incarceration. Now, abolishing mandatory minimums is going to reduce mass incarceration as the link. And then the impact is something about, say, human rights abuses in prison. You see, we've only got one link. The uniqueness is practically its own link. And even if people make some arguments about mandatory minimums aren't actually gonna do too much, even if you fix those, they're not going to fully solve or fully take out our solvency. And we're still going to get some of this impact, right? We're stopping people from having their human rights abused in prison. What are some of the strategic benefits of a soft left affirmative? First, they're really plausible for lay judges, which is nice. Like the mandatory minimums AF is going to make a lot more sense to someone's parent than an affirmative that's going to take legalizing marijuana out to stopping the cartels and then stopping bioterrorism from the cartels, right? Like that's going to be much harder to believe. Because of that, they're also harder to link disads to. Hard to contest their solvency, and they're often even genuinely good ideas, which means you have a lot of good evidence of people advocating for them. The general strategy, especially in Eastern Missouri, is that you're going to beat disadvantages on the link level, right? The politics disad, you're going to just beat it on the link so there's no impact there. And then you can outweigh with even your small impact because people can't get rid of it. At NCFL, our sophomore year, Grace and I were in this spread round. They read like 6 off on us. We were terrified. But we were reading a soft left affirmative, and we actually won that round just because we answered the links on all of their disads relatively well. and we had, a small impact about, giving asylum to people who are suffering domestic violence, and that was good enough. So there really can be strategic benefits if you're able to beat disadvantages on the link level and outweigh with just your small impact. That being said, there are certainly some strategic shortcomings. Um, Soft left affirmatives are easy pickings for counter plans because they have sort of small impacts, often only one advantage. It's pretty easy to solve it. And you don't have a lot of room for arguing against that because, like I said, you're generally picking it to be relatively uncontestable. They're also easy pickings for critiques, which generally are, well positioned because you're sort of agreeing with the critique in many ways, right? You're probably fighting against racism or classism or sexism, but not in the way that the critique is advocating. And a lot of critique literature is really based on that, right? In the criminal justice reform topic, we had, reform versus abolition debates with the critique. And it's going to be a lot easier to link into that critique if you're trying to, say, get rid of human rights abuses in prison than if you're reading some, big stick affirmative about cartels. And then finally, it's hard to outweigh large disadvantages in front of flow judges, right? If you're running against somebody who's willing to buy some sort of a 1% doctrine type thing with, extinction style impacts, you might have some trouble. But as long as you're sort of prepared for these three types of arguments, you're going to do great with soft left affirmatives. I hope this was helpful. I hope you all run some soft left affirmatives. Thank you.